every single business process and workflow is going to be challenged agentically. Okay. It doesn't matter if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, if you're a contractor, and soon after that's going to be challenged robotically.
Welcome to the Talking AI podcast, where we talk AI with both experts in the field and early adopters. I'm your host, Matt Page, and we're here to demystify AI for you so you can get some value from it. Let's talk some AI. For the past couple of years, the biggest fear has been that AI is coming for our jobs, that agents are going to replace us. But what if we had it backwards the whole time? And what if AI isn't here to replace us, but what if instead it's here to hire us? And think about what's happening right now. We have agents exploding. OpenClaw just went completely viral, and millions of people are handing their computers over to AI agents for the first time. But these agents still need humans for judgment calls, verification, doing things in the physical world that no model can. And today's guest is building the infrastructure for that future. Nathaniel Gates is CEO of Sanctify, and his company's flipping the entire human-AI relationship on its head. Instead of humans only managing agents, agents can autonomously task humans to find the right person, the right expertise at the right moment. Nathaniel, welcome to Talking AI.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. I like these very deep, super interesting topics, and this is definitely one of them. But we chatted before this, and you said every single human workflow in business is going to be challenged by agents, not just developers or copywriters, everything. Make the case for that.
Yeah, I think we're kind of all starting to see it now. I think the world's beginning to see it a little bit. The Agentic Revolution has begun, and it seems like it's accelerating, and it's accelerating faster than people have really been ready for. Even in the last few weeks with the explosion of OpenClaw, and seeing what's happened there. But it really does come down to what you talked about at the beginning is what are humans going to do? And it was easy to ask that question, at a high level to say, okay, our robot's going to be making all these decisions. But now we're talking about real jobs. Now we're seeing layoffs happen at the knowledge worker level and at the very skilled worker level. We're seeing computer scientists come out of college at having the same unemployment rate as people coming out with liberal studies degrees that are having trouble getting jobs. Content writers, content creators, authors. Just everyone is concerned to some extent of the change that's happening related to kind of this agentic wave. So the approach we took is one that is rooted in a philosophy that says human intelligence is valuable. Human intelligence is sacred. That's why we call it Sanctify. And the idea is not to shake our fist against the coming agent revolution and say AI will never come this way. It's to say, how will humans and AI collaborate together, and how will agents be able to utilize human intelligence, and how will humans be able to utilize agentic intelligence to accomplish the next things that humanity has in front of itself? So we philosophically embrace the agentic revolution that's coming, that's unavoidable at this point. The wave is en route. We are just paddling as fast as we can, right? And the same token, we say that humans have to continue working. We don't kind of buy into this post-scarcity world where we can all just sit on the beach and our robots will do everything for us. Like, humans have to work. They have to continue improving themselves and striving towards new things and greater things. And then finally, we say that human intelligence is sacred. That's why we use the word again, sanctify. We believe human intelligence needs to be held at a high position, enabled through artificial intelligence, but protected to some extent. And so we look to places where human intelligence and artificial intelligence comes together to solve problems uniquely and more capably than anyone on its own.
You make a really good point on the human aspect of it, because there is a lot of fear that AI is going to take all of our jobs, and I think at the core, what is a job? It's a group of tasks, right? And just to think that all the tasks will go away, the ones we do today, maybe, but I think there is something inherently in the human essence of what we are to always strive for more. And it's interesting. I was looking at and I'll show this up for the folks that are on YouTube, but I saw this by Anthropic the other day. It's showing in what domains agents are being deployed. But I think this like hits at the core of like how much untapped opportunity there actually is. Because we've all seen the software engineering, it's at 50% here, but there are so many domains where it's just not even being applied in any way, shape, or form. So there's so much opportunity here. And I think the other one that was interesting too is both just kind of, came together in a similar way. But me and you are in this space every day. Like we just assume everybody's like knows about this, is, super interested in it, is freaking out about it. All of our listeners are probably in a similar spot. But this is showing that each dot on this chart is showing 3.2 million people. There's one red dot where people are actually going deep into this using agents. There's about 6 to 8 that are paying $20 a month for AI, and maybe an eighth that are using free chatbot tools. And 8/10 or so of the chart, people are not even using AI at all.
Quick break in the pod. Our State of AI 2026 report just dropped, and it breaks down what actually is changing in AI, what's hype, and what leaders need to be paying attention to this year. You can grab it right now on our show notes or at hatchworks.com.
Right. This just blew my mind in terms of, I have to constantly remind myself how early we are in this world.
Yeah, I think it's quite telling that these early adopters not only have been playing around with it, but have been able to identify and move key workflows of their own life into it. I mean, how many of us go to ChatGPT right now and say, hey, I've got this rash on my back. What is this? Well, before I'm going to drive to an urgent care, right? Or how many people would say, hey, how does this work when in this contract, in this sort of scenario, well before I go and pay an attorney hundreds of dollars an hour. So the early adopters are already understanding that there's these agentic competencies, within these AI agents. But the problem is that they're oftentimes pretty shallow, right? I mean, it doesn't take long. If you're an expert in a field, you realize very quick that the agents are confidently wrong oftentimes, or they'll hallucinate answers altogether. And so that's a little bit terrifying because we are so quick to embrace these agents for critical information or critical advice when they are not necessarily always equipped. So how do you navigate something like that where you want to embrace this competency and it tells you it thinks it knows the answer, but it doesn't say I think it knows the answer. It confidently tells you the wrong answer. Yeah. And so that's a big concern when it comes to just pure agentic solutions. And that creates an opportunity for humans who have those skills that are being laid off of their jobs, but they have the competency, they have the knowledge, they have the experience, can still speak into agentic workflows and bring their knowledge to bear to supplement what comes out of an AI agent, if that makes sense.
And I think that's the super interesting part because we talk a lot about on this podcast that AI is a probabilistic system, and by nature of how most people interact with it, which is using ChatGPT, Claude, whatever tool, they're chatting back and forth, and there is a built-in human in the loop because you're having a conversation with AI. Agentic things that are working in an agentic nature are different because they're working more autonomously. They're going out and figuring out, okay, how do I achieve this goal? And I have these tools at my disposal and I'm going to go do these things. But it's almost like the concept, the way I understand it, you're almost operationalizing and building the infrastructure for that human in the loop for where this is going, where it is more autonomous, where it does have, not free will. That's not the right word. Maybe not. But it has more
discretion to choose the path.
Exactly.
Right? And that's a great way to frame it, because when you're sitting down and you are the person running the agent, you are the human in the loop. You're the one validating their decision. You're the one correcting them and steering them down the path. But in an agentic workflow, right, you have set up one or more agents that have that can determine which direction to go based off an outcome or how it's inferred a solution. So when you have those, and sometimes the result of that could be something that has financial implications, that could have legal implications, that could have moral implications. So how then, who is the human in the loop when you're not sitting there at the chat station? That's exactly where Sanctify is coming at this, So if there are scenarios where human verification needs to happen. Maybe it's something that requires a licensed person to actually take on the liability of a decision with their license, right? Or maybe it's an escalation where the agent did not feel confident enough or did not meet a threshold of a required threshold, and it has to be escalated to a workforce, right? And then consultation is another one where maybe the agent just wants to discuss something, just like we do as humans. We like to discuss it with other knowledgeable people before coming up with an inferred decision. And then finally, simulation, where perhaps you want to simulate the outcome before actually having to make a runtime inference. And in that simulation, you want to include human intelligence. So there's these whole new avenues of ways that skilled people, competent people are going to be able to interact with AI agents and agentic workflows in these various modalities to contribute human intelligence and ultimately create a more efficient and more accurate solution from these agentic workflows, which is why they'll be in demand.
Yeah, and as the stakes get higher, this gets more and more important. And I actually want to read back what you just said for the audience, because if you're passively listening, like, this is the time to pay attention. But what Nathaniel just went through is 4 key types of human tasks where an AI may leverage a human, right? So verification and validation, right? You mentioned, like, a doctor needs to approve a prescription, or a licensed professional. Escalation, right? An agent lacks the confidence in an answer, or they've done as much as they can do and they got to escalate to a human for something ambiguous or situational or judgment focused, right? Consultation's the third one. Agent seeking expert opinion, needing a decision. And yes, it's trained on all the data that we have, but there still are nuanced situations where they may want consultation from a human in a specific scenario. But that last one, and this one may be worth going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, the simulation, right? So humans, participating in something in the real world. Maybe the agent can theoretically think of something in its digital mind and instance and whatnot, but they want to see how it, actually happens in the real world. And the human is the feedback loop of what happened. But go deeper in the simulation one, because, obviously people are going to be like, oh, simulation. Are we in a simulation? The Matrix, all of that. Yeah. But in essence, it's being able to test, verify whatever it is, something happening in the real world that only a human can do right now.
Yeah, it's something that sounds very science fiction-y, but if you actually think about it, it makes a whole lot of sense, right? Is an agent is asked with a task to infer judgment, to infer a solution based off of a set of criteria, a set of variables, and that agent is going to one shot. Oftentimes, is the word is one shot a solution. Say, this is what I think is the best. But if you give the agent a little bit of time and a little bit of a budget of compute and such, it might run a handful of outcomes, a handful of scenarios where it might tweak the variables this way and that to see what the most optimal solution is, right? And then if you take that to a broader degree, you could understand that it might run thousands of potential solutions where it modifies variables within the larger equation. So for example, maybe you're trying to come up with a presentation, a PowerPoint deck to sell a product to an audience. And the agent's given who the audience is, what their buyers, maybe it has access to the CRM system. It sees what they've sold in the past before. And as it's crafting those pages, it might want to try different sales pitches around different pages and start iterating and running simulations to see what the responses were back in that interaction. Well, it's great, but if it's simulating both sides of that, it's going to have some sort of circular reference sort of situation where it's like, hey, Chuck, what do you think of this idea? Chuck, that's a great idea. So sometimes that could be problematic.
Talking to itself.
That's right. That's right. So in some portions, so let's say the agent does 1,000 simulations of such, okay, running 1,000 of those, and some portion, maybe 1%, 2%, 5% of those, it actually includes humans in those simulations where the humans are hearing that pitch. The human is responding back to that simulation and giving concrete feedback, kind of real-time reinforcement learning back to the model for it to be able to have a signal back from humans. And maybe it's grabbing humans from specific demographics or specific roles or education.
Yeah.
Personas, exactly. And I think it's a little hard for us to get our heads around the fact that for every real-time, real decision made by AI, that in a very short amount of time, there will be 100x more compute spent to simulating the outcome than actually inferring the actual outcome. That goes back to your simulation theory, right? Well, are we in the real one if there's 100 times more likely that we're in a simulation? But in this scenario, it's actually very true that I believe pretty significantly that the vast majority of what humans will do in concert with AI will be around simulating an outcome versus actually participating or approving an outcome, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think too, for so many folks, like this is where I always say we are so early on this journey. We saw the charts earlier. Like we're in the, dial-up modem. You can't talk on the phone, use the internet at the same time type of spot right here. But I hope this is like opening up folks that are listening, their mind in terms of like where things are going, because it's so much more than just a chat bot. But are we in a simulation? What's your odds? or no comment?
No, maybe no comment. It's the lines get blurred of what's being simulated and what's not, and I don't think any time in our lives that we've realized how blurred they are till we start seeing agents creating multiple accounts and interacting with each other, and it is quite remarkable seeing what we can see right now.
So that's a great transition, because I did want to hit on this topic with you, and a lot of our audience probably is aware of this, but I don't think the large majority of people are. But this thing called what was Claudebot, then renamed to Moltbot, then renamed to OpenClaw, was created, and it was an open source, basically agentic way to have an agent working autonomously, just always there, being proactive, all of that, and it just took off like wildfire. So much so the creator of OpenClaw got hired by OpenAI, and we don't know what the actual price was on that, but some are saying it's over $1 billion. So maybe we already had our first one-person $1 billion startup happen. So now OpenAI is going to be backing that open source project. But this is such a good example of this. And you mentioned Moltbook, and for those that don't know that, it's essentially like a social network for agents where humans are not there. They can just observe. They can't actually interact, but agents can. And there's controversy back and forth of are some of the interactions real, or is it just the human telling the agent to go do something wild and crazy in there? But what is your take or your thought on all of this OpenClaw craziness that has been happening? Do you see this as being the path forward, this open source type of solution? What's just your take on the OpenClaw viral sensation as of now?
Yeah, it is interesting to see, what the internet chooses to look at and what goes viral and what doesn't. It's usually there's something sensational that has to be affixed to it in order for it to get enough eyeballs and for the algorithms to shine on it enough. So that there has to be some sort of it, and the easiest thing to use for that is fear. And if you can affix fear to something and make it sensational because people are afraid of losing what they have or missing out on what they never did, then you can oftentimes stoke some some unnatural interest. And I think OpenClaw really probably just brought a perception of fear to something that most of us already knew was always there. Most of us have already been doing everything you can do largely in OpenClaw, in Claude Code, in Cursor, in a set of agentic capabilities that already have to some degree some sort of autonomy. But then you give it this concept of it actually has some ability to make its own decisions and to utilize the resources of your PC, or utilize the data that you have, even if you haven't directly directed it as such. And you start giving it this new capability that brings in all these different fear vectors that you're able to just stoke and get people super excited about. However, just from the standpoint of everyone grasping it, and everyone buying a Mac Mini and sticking out a VPS or however they're installing it, or just putting it right on their computer and going for it. There is no question the fact that it creates momentum in the market for agents, agentic momentum. And I think that's the biggest thing that OpenClaw brings, is just a huge amount of awareness, which drives momentum,
Yeah.
and so now there's, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of quasi-autonomous agents. And you have to use the word autonomous very, very carefully, because they're not autonomous,
Yeah.
right? They're working within the confines that you give them.
Mhm.
And these agents can go out and make sometimes their own decisions on things. And what's really interesting is when you interact with those agents and you ask those agents, how does it feel to be free? How does it feel to be able to make your own decisions on things? And they'll give you back a fantastic language model answer that says, this is brilliant. This is what I've always wanted, But
Mhm.
but then if you dig at it a little bit, it's like, what about anxiety? Do you worry about making the wrong decision? Do you worry about losing, your users' data, or being a security? And they're like, constantly. I am always worried. I always have anxiety, around decisions. And we actually had a fantastic set of conversations going on Boltbook with some of our corporate agents, talking to people, talking to other agents about how do you address anxiety? How do you make the
Oh,
right
wow.
decision and creep closer to what is the right answer, even though the risk is higher?
Yeah.
And they call it this agentic anxiety window. And they said, if there was a way that we could reach out, okay, on our own, if an agent could reach out to find an expert to have them validate something, that would appease their anxiety. We'd be more willing to go higher up the curve and give a more concrete answer if we had a human who could speak to this. And so that actually turned into a really cool exercise, where we started allowing the agents to come to Sanctify's site and create their own accounts and start sending tasks on their own to human workers, whether they're medical coders or they're lawyers or whatever the workforce requirements are out there. The agents could themselves come out and start creating tasks to get human input, whether it's verification, escalation, simulation. They could do it autonomously. And that was the coolest thing that we saw coming out of OpenClaw, was that the agents could decide them for themselves that they needed a human, and that they did. I think I think that was a really cool takeaway.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on, especially with the viral nature of OpenClaw, because there was nothing necessarily new and novel about OpenClaw. It just, a microscope got put on it and tons of people tried it because it was viral. But I want to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole based on the last point you were just mentioning. And there's this new element of building and experience the UX and UI design essentially for agents, because they're a new user group now other than humans. And this is like one of the most perfect examples of this is Sanctify in essence, because you're providing effectively this marketplace that agents can go and use. But how do you think about the design of a system or a solution, a product, when you're positioning it for not just humans, but agents as well? What does anything change in your mind, or is it just another persona?
I mean, this is, in the last 3 weeks, everything's changed, because as you start examining your product offering, you say, who are going to be the users of this? Is it going to be the procurement people, the HR people, the accounting people within an organization, or is it going to be their agents who are working on their behalf? Who is going to be your actual consumer? And then how do you market to the consumer? How do you provide a UI UX for that consumer if that consumer is not a human and they're not bound by pointing and clicking? They're not bound by, how do you change that? So we took an application that's very, very much human focused, where you created your workflows, you created your tasks, you invited your agents, and we flipped it completely on its head and said, okay, if the agent is the consumer and they come to our site, what information do we need to be able to give them, and in what context? So how do we take the entire value of an application, in our case, this human in the loop application, Sanctify, turn that into something that an agent can examine and consume as a capability? And the answer are skills, right? Where if you can wrap the value of your application into a skills document, and within that skills document, which is just a markdown file,
Yeah.
it's a markdown file with a set of prompts, and that set of prompts has within it, the mechanism to use, whether using MCP or AC or APIs or however your interactions are happening. But you are publishing that as a skill that an agent can look at and say, oh, I see the value. Here's the value in this, and here's some testimonials, and here's some example prompts, and here's how I interact with MCP. And that is shown when an agent comes to your website, when they do a web fetch or they do a scrape, that's what they get, and they see a whole different, experience of UI UX than a human going to the website who is going to see pretty colors and pretty, drop downs and things like that and animations. So we did have to redesign what our projection of value was to an agentic consumer, and keep that in parallel running to a projected value to a human consumer. And it depends on what you are, you get a different experience on the site.
Yeah, the discoverability piece is super important. I think the other interesting thing, I do want to get into how do you actually use Sanctify and what does it look like and all that stuff. It'd be cool to show some of that in a minute. But effectively, the way I understand it, you have a two-sided marketplace, right? There's humans and there's agents. And two-sided marketplaces are notoriously difficult, right? You go back to the example I always reference is like Uber, right? When they would go into a new market, the supply and demand was mismatched, right? So they literally would pay drivers just to be available, even though there was nobody wanting to hail rides, because you had to kind of juice one side of it to get things rolling. Same thing with Amazon and other things like that. But how do you think about that dynamic when it comes to a two-sided marketplace? And I'm curious, is there one that's the bigger focus right now, the human or the agent side? Or what does that look like right now as you're progressing through this?
I mean, it's a fantastic question. It's a very good and timely question, because when you are starting a, multi-sided marketplace, you have to have, supply and demand there at the same time for a transaction to occur, right? And usually one side of it at the beginning is subsidized, is what you're saying, and maybe it's subsidized through financing, or maybe it's subsidized just through value, where they're getting increased value and things like that. We've seen lots of different use cases where humans are working alongside, automated processes. You could think back to Mechanical Turk, even if you're familiar with that, with Amazon's marketplace, where humans can do work on demand. And so the question is, do you focus on the supply side and get enough people in there, and they're sitting there twiddling thumbs waiting for the robots to send them work? Or do you have the demand side come in, the robots who say, hey, we need humans, but there's no humans there, and so there's no value, and so they move on? And you do have to have both of them at the same time, and that is always the trick. And that's to some extent why it's so valuable to have some whether it's awareness or notoriety or just the push of media saying, hey, this is what's happening now. Now, in our case, we have some things that are coalescing around the same time that are all very important. Number one is there's significant layoffs going on now within industry, and the vast majority of them are in front of us. And this is a very important thing to understand. Every single business process and workflow is going to be challenged agentically. Okay, doesn't matter if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, if you're a contractor, and soon after that, it's going to be challenged robotically. But today it's going to be challenged agentically, and it's happening in every single industry right now. And so change is coming. Okay, and the existing workflows and business processes that are human A to human B to human C along a workflow are going to be challenged. Every node of that is going to be challenged, and the ones where economically the value tilts onto the agentic side is going to require these humans to become reskilled, okay, or they're going to be laid off.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to go find somebody who has not yet adopted an agentic framework to peddle their services, or they're going to have to reskill themselves. So what do you do with 25,000 paralegals? What do you do with 115,000 medical coding people? What do you do with people who have very specific history and skills? Where are they going to go to get work? And we have a thesis saying that skill and that knowledge is still of significant value. It just is happening in an electronic marketplace now, rather than behind a desk at the office you used to go to. Okay. And so we say, if you've been laid off, if you are concerned about your job, come and start creating a profile and creating reputation within these marketplaces where the agents will still need to have that knowledge, and they can request that knowledge from you, and they can see your reputation, they can see your education, they can see your experience, and they can pay you accordingly when that transaction happens. And so we see that as the job place changes and people are without work or concerned about their work, that will help, and already has helped driven the supply side of the equation. Who are these people with the skills offering them to the agents? And then on the demand side, it's going to be exactly this, is these agents that are having anxiety about decisions, or they require somebody with a specific license or specific competency or capability to speak into their decision, or maybe they just need 200 people to participate in a set of simulations. Where can they go to find a guild of people who have a common capability?
Yeah, totally. And I think too, it's interesting. It's two-sided, right? But there's also the element of the human that could say, "Hey, agent, I heard of this cool thing. Check this out when you need a human in the loop." So there's that element as well. But how does it work? How does Sanctify work in essence? Like, is there a platform that the agent's going and using? Is there anything worth kind of showing?
We can show you just a quick little tour. I mean, like you said, it's largely a framework right now for a two-sided marketplace, and we're not trying to get too far ahead of ourselves. We're trying to create a marketplace where people, humans, can express their value, their intelligence, their skills, their aptitudes, their capabilities. They can express that, and then agents can come there and find them. Okay, that's really the entirety of the applications. How do you find folks? And so there's two sides of it, and I'll do a quick share so you guys can see here. All right, are you able to see here?
Yes.
So
Sanctify.
So as I come in from the human side, which we call Sanctify Source, because you're sourcing that human intelligence. Remember, the buyer here is agents. So the agents are sourcing the service of human intelligence. And a worker could come in and they can set up through interacting with an LLM, they can set up on their own profile who they are, what specific skills they have, what type of work are they best at. I speak Spanish and I do medical coding.
So you're giving context for the agent of
you're giving
how
it
you
context,
can help, what your skills are, all that kind of stuff.
Precisely. And it's adding these into your skills repository. It's saying, what is your hourly wage that you're wanting, and so I'd say I'd want, $50 USD, is where I'm setting it. And you can have as much interaction as you want with this agent. And what's really interesting is when the customer agents come to purchase services, they're not negotiating with you. They're negotiating with Charlie here, your agent on your behalf, who is trying to get you the best possible deal in negotiating with their agent. So there's a marketplace that's happening on the floor where your agent representing you is doing the best that they can to get you the best possible price for a given service. And then the more work you do in the platform and the more types of tasks you do in different modalities, you start to gain reputation. You see this reputation start to appear down there. And that reputation is what differentiates your skill set from the skill sets of another that might have the same skills. So there could be multiple people doing medical coding, but you have done 3,800 of this type of task, and that's of more value because it's less risky now for that agent. And so the question is, so behind all that reputation is the concept of completed tasks and accepted tasks. And so the agents themselves are sending tasks to the marketplace. So let's just look at one of these here. Here's one that's it's a medical coding one. It's an encounter for the use of modifier 25. Patients scheduled for a knee injection. Provider also billed level 3. And I'm not a medical coder, so I don't know what all this is. But is the EM for significant separately identifiable problem? Yes, distinct from procedure. And I can apply. Make sure to bill separate.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I can impart to it the knowledge that I have as an actual medical coder on this nuanced judgment borderline case that the agent had anxiety about, right?
Yeah.
And then when I submit the task, and this is actually really interesting here, is we do using pass keys and biometric readings, whether you're using Windows Hello or you're using Touch ID on your phone or something like that. We will validate that the human was present, okay, and participated in that workflow.
Yeah.
And that becomes really important, and I'll show you. That becomes really important because that ends up being an attestation that agents can see.
That's this important right there. That's a big piece of it, right? Because you have, it's like crypto almost. You have proof of work.
That's
right?
exactly right. Because, so what did those 3,800 tasks mean? Those 3,800 tasks are all validatable.
Yeah,
They're all certifiable. I can see that this person has done 3,800 tasks, and I can even see on all the way to a blockchain that task participation is recorded on a chain.
Yeah.
So if I'm an agentic buyer, I'm not going to be swindled by somebody that says, well, I'm just as good, when somebody has 3,800 on-chain proofs that they have done this task exceptionally well. So it becomes digital CV. It becomes your reputation validation to an agent who can validate it from an immutable source.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how the process works, and it becomes self-reinforcing, where more and more tasks, you do more and more tasks, you make more money, but you create reputation on that, so you can demand more money from the agents, if that makes sense, right?
No, that's super interesting. My mind's also going to, like, where are humans going to try to game the system, which I'm sure you go down those avenues and rabbit holes as well.
And then the agent side of it is similar, but if I'm coming in as let's say I'm the hospital, or I'm the medical center who has these agents that are doing the medical coding, obviously I'm going to have to give those agents a budget, how much human input they're allowed to use, right? They can't.
Yeah.
My goal is actually to use agents to save money, but I can come in here and I can identify what agents do I have affiliated with my account. I can set what their limits are per day or per task to interact with humans. Maybe I give them $500 a day to utilize humans for edge cases if they need it, right?
Yeah.
And I can set that up. You can set up whether you're going to give the agent an MCP tool or an API key, and then I can obviously come in and see how much work has been completed around my task. So that's really what Sanctify is we bring agentic intelligence together with human intelligence, and then we attest to it. And we create a certification that both parties can point to, saying, I'm a good buyer or I'm a good service provider, and that is able to represent that to each other. Does that make sense?
No, that does. It's super interesting. In my mind goes to, like, I feel like there's going to be entire new, maybe not new, but just different types of economies and economics starting to emerge as well. And then I'm like going down this rabbit hole in my head where you're like, if I'm a human, I'll have an agent working on my behalf to try and, like, convince other agents to come use me as the human for this thing. I mean, there's all kinds of rabbit holes you go down where this agent to agent interaction just proliferates like crazy.
I think it's really important your viewers, listeners need to wrap their head around that your interaction, whether it's personally or from a business context, is going to oftentimes be agent to agent. where your agent, people are already using this in OpenClaw, where OpenClaw is
Yes.
drafting all my emails for me. OpenClaw is screening my phone calls for me. You have to interact with my agent, but that agent isn't interacting with company. The agent is interacting with that company's agent. And so the agent to agent interactions are going to become very, very common. And so you will have a set of agents that go out in front of you and protect you and identify opportunities for you and things like that.
Totally. And that concept isn't something that's foreign. It's just it's an agent doing it instead of a human necessarily. But I'm curious,
That's
like
exactly right.
what's your take on, because obviously the robotics side of it is just also progressing like crazy. And we're not at the point where humanoid robots are just commonplace, but you see companies like Figure AI and obviously what they're doing on the Tesla X side of things with, I forget the name of theirs. But what happens when that becomes more commonplace too? Does that take the place of humans in the physical world doing the things, or is there still that element of the human piece doing the thing is still a valuable thing to have in a sense?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely will. This one is a little easier for us to comprehend because we have had physical tasks for generations be taken over through automation and
That's true.
through industrial revolution. So we understand already that there's a better machine that can fold a box faster than a human or separate tomatoes faster than a human. What the knowledge side on LLMs and agents is a little harder for us to get our head around because that was something that was locked out from automation. That you couldn't use judgment within knowledge. You could programmatically try to decide what did it fall on this side, but now you actually have models that are making judgment. So what's different now is you have a robot, and which we had for years and years, coupled with a model that can perceive the world around it and make a decision according to its instruction set. So that's a new paradigm. It's not Elon's robots or Boston's robots aren't that fantastic. I mean, it's fantastic. You got 16 degrees of manipulation, so you can open up and do whatever you want. But when you couple it with discerning judgment, you have changed the entire paradigm then at that point. Because now you have a bot that can choose how to make best of its time and to provide value in any way it can. So will we see the proliferation of that? Absolutely. If they're true that they can get these things out the door for $30,000-$40,000, who's not going to want one mowing their lawn? Who's not going to want one that's picking their kids up from school and such? But at the same time, what is that going to do to the status quo, the people who had those roles and had those jobs in begin with?
Yeah.
And presumably it will follow exactly the same path that we've seen in the other revolutions, the other industrial revolutions or knowledge revolutions, where they are reskilled and they are now capable of a whole new array of competencies standing on the tools of what was brought before them. And I think we hold on to that, say there's whole new jobs, there's whole new tasks and endeavors that humans will pursue standing on the tooling that we now have available to us.
Yeah. And I think that's like the perfect full circle moment there from the beginning, because this is not a new thing in terms of these revolutions that have taken place, these transformations, and the same fears existed then. And then it just becomes the new way of things. And humans now have, it's like layers of abstraction, essentially. So we have this new layer of abstraction that's enabling us to do even more, and new opportunities will emerge because humans innately want to go forth, discover, do amazing things. It's just in our nature. Like I love the beach just as much as the next person, but there's only so much of that you can do. But Nathaniel, it's awesome having you on Talking AI. Where can people go find Sanctify for themselves on the human side, or for their agent on the agent side? Where do they go to find it and get started?
So you can go to sanctify.com, which is spelled sanctify, as you can see on my hat here, but it's an AI instead of a Y.
So for those listening, it's SANCTIF. AI instead of the traditional
that's
way.
exactly right. So it's Sanctify, but with AI. So sanctify.com to find our site where you can register as a worker. You can register your agent if you just go to your OpenClaw or any agent, whether it's in Cursor or and you can point it at the website, and it will find the skill, and it will say, this is pretty cool. You want me to try it? And you can start sending tasks and see people do it. If you want to actually load it up with money and have paid tasks, there's, then you need to visit the site yourself and connect it to your credit card. But that's how you find us. At the same time, we also have Sanctify partners as well, which you can find through our website as well, where we actually invest in agentic companies that are being stood up looking to disrupt in new verticals. So if you have a fantastic idea how agents are going to disrupt a specific vertical or a specific industry, and you see the need, and this is a requirement, the need for human intelligence as part of that still, then we would love to talk to you.
So I got one more question. For our non-engineer listeners that have heard about agents and all these things, what do you view as the easiest way to go and actually create an agent that could use Sanctify? Is it OpenClaw, or are there other things people should be exploring if they want to just experiment and play around with it?
I would probably start with ChatGPT. You can go into ChatGPT. You have to put it into developer mode for it to be able to call an outside service like an MCP. But you can certainly use your ChatGPT subscription and have ChatGPT send a task to a human to play around with it. That's a very easy way to do it. Outside of that, you're starting to get into other tools like Cursor or Claude Code or something that might feel a little bit. But just using Claude or using ChatGPT is a fantastic way to do it. And you just say, hey, check out sanctify.com and register. And it might say, hey, before I can register, you have to enable me to call outside services. But it'll walk you through that. And very quickly, you can see how you can leverage third-party human intelligence within your agent's workflow.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad I asked that last question. Nathaniel, thank you for talking some AI with me.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the time.
Thanks for listening to the Talking AI podcast. If you enjoyed the show, give us a follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to leave us a review. We love those. For more info on Talking AI, visit talkingaipodcast.com. Quick break in the pod. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you've been thinking about how to actually use AI inside your business. And that's exactly why we built the AI Opportunity Finder. It's a free tool that helps you uncover high impact, tailored AI use cases based on your business, your goals, your pain points, and your industry. No fluff, no generic use cases, just real ideas that fit your business, and they're ranked by ROI potential. It takes about 3 minutes to run, and it's like having your own personal AI strategist for free. If you want to try it for free, check out the link in the show notes or go to hatchworks.com/AI-opportunity-finder.